Hello everyone, this is Curt with another browser video. Today, in this lightning video, I wanted to talk about some new support that we just added to the browser gateway that enables it to listen on either HTTPS or HTTP. We'll talk about why we did that. We'll talk about how you control it with some new config variables. We'll give you a demo, of course. And finally, at the end, we'll give you the version numbers of which browser gateway will contain this new support. So why are we doing this? Why are we adding the ability to switch between listening on HTTPS or HTTP? So far, everything we've been shipping has been tied to HTTPS. This is because we typically deploy in a cloud VM instance, and we're listening on the open internet over TLS. Now, this means that you need to bring your own TLS certificates that are publicly signed to keep the browser happy. It's up to you to go out and get those from Let's Crypt or a similar place. And you've got to provision those underneath the browser gateway. And you also need to provision your associated DNS name. This is all great to get us to this point, but what if we wanted to have the browser gateway deployed in a scenario where it's now sitting behind a load balancer, and that load balancer is actually doing all the TLS termination? Or what if we wanted to deploy a container running the browser gateway in an orchestration environment like AWS Fargate, which also terminates TLS? How do we do that? Well, we had to teach the browser gateway to listen to HTTP in order to pull that off. And at the bottom, for a better developer experience, running as localhost is a much better arena to play in. There's no need for you to go out and get your public certs or mess with your local DNS to pretend that your local laptop is some globally accessible DNS name. So these are all great enhancements. The way you control all this is with a couple of different variables that we've introduced. One is called ZDagent scheme, and it's somewhat self-explanatory, and you can either set that to HTTP or HTTPS. If you neglect to set it or opt out of setting that, the default is going to be HTTP. And the agent listen port is an arbitrary value. You can specify that to be anything you want, depending on how you want to deploy your browser gateway. And if you don't specify that, the default that we choose under the covers will depend on how you have set or how you have defaulted your ZDagent scheme value. So again, if you're running as HTTP, we're going to go ahead and pick the obvious port of 80. And similarly, if you're listening on HTTPS, then we're going to default to 443. But you can set these values collectively to anything that you want. Let's go ahead and show you a demo. So here is the same shell script that I used in the previous demo. And you can see that I have those two variables we just discussed set up, listening on HTTP and port 80. In addition to doing this, if you're running locally, if you want to run as localhost, the target array needs to include a wildcard that says literally localhost. And this whole stanza here is identical to the one below it. I'm just running the browser gateway as localhost, and we're going to hit the service that I have named Mattermost Blue, and that is protecting a containerized version of Mattermost. Let's go ahead and start the gateway. And you can see at the bottom, based on those configuration attributes that we set, that the browser gateway is indeed listening on HTTP and on port 80. Okay, so if we bring up a new tab in Microsoft Edge and we surf to localhost, you can see that the browser gateway does not know who we are. There's no sign of a browser session cookie there yet. So let's go ahead and go through the SSO procedures with our IDP. And much like you've seen before, up comes the app, just like we've seen before. But now we're running a localhost and the browser gateway is perfectly happy. Let's go ahead and stop the browser gateway. And let's change the configuration to be HTTPS. In fact, let's not specify the port this time. Just going to comment that out. Should be listening on TLS, and it should default to port 443. And as we expect, it is now listening on HTTPS on port 443. Come back to Microsoft Edge, bring up a new tab, and we use the shortcut we saw in the previous demo, which is going to hit mattermost.zd.net founder AO, which again is a wildcard name that is pointing by virtue of my local Etsy host file to my laptop. So in effect, this is localhost, but for TLS purposes, it's going to look like that domain. Let's go ahead and start that up. And again, much like before, since it's a new tab, no sign of the browser session cookie, we will go through the SSO procedure. And up comes the app. So that concludes the demo. And this gimme gimme is basically me giving myself a reminder to tell you which version of the browser gateway is going to contain all this new support. And the next version will be 0.26.0, which I will be shipping momentarily. So once that is published and is out in the GitHub container registry, you'll be able to come and do everything that I just showed you in this demo. That wraps up this lightning video. If you got any questions, please reach out to me, and we will see you on the next video.